All right, DragonCon 2021. Here we are on the American Sci-Fi Classics Track. Always such a great time to be to spend on Gary and Joe's track, and we're all excited to be here to talk about the movies of 1984. Some say it's the greatest movie year ever. Some need to be convinced of that. Yeah, so we'll talk about it. We'll see. All right, and I am Van Allen Plexico. I am the host of the White Rocket podcast, among others, and author of quite a few books. But that's not what you're here for. You're here to talk about the movies of 1984. So let me introduce our panelists tonight, starting with David.
All right, very good. My name is David Wright. I am a lifelong lover of 80s cinema. I have made the specific effort of just delving into 80s movies almost exclusively for the last 2 or 3 years. I've concluded that 1984 is my favorite year of the decade, so I'll be championing the year for sure. But anyway, I've known Van here for a long time, and we came together over Avengers fandom. I'm also the author of the Galahad's Doom epic fantasy novel series.
Mike.
Howdy, I am Mike Gordon. I'm a writer and podcaster. Earth Station 1 is where you can hear me every week with all sorts of pop culture reviews. I also host the DragonCon Report and co-host the Earth Station Who report, podcast for the ESO network. And yeah, I do a little bit of writing comics-wise. My books, Tiki Zombie, just celebrated their 10th anniversary, so pretty excited about that. And but again, not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about movies.
Bobby.
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash, and when I'm not watching movies and TV, I write the occasional book. So I can't say that 1984 is my favorite movie year overall, but there are some really good stuff out of this year.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, and we're going to see where we end up kind of rating it, and we're going to see, because I was kind of talking about this beforehand, that I really feel like this year, 1984, it may not have the most home runs or grand slams or whatever, but it does have an inordinate number of movies we remember. A lot of movies. It was like week after week there were 1, 2, 3 coming out at a time, and you go back and look at that list, which we're going to kind of talk about, and you're just like, that, just one after another. So we've certainly got plenty to talk about tonight, and maybe in the future we'll do some more of these on different years. All right, so 1984, I think the first thing that we need to get into is, I've said that kind of what made this year so good was that it just had a lot of pretty darn good, memorable movies. Was there anything else about it? Does anybody feel like it had like their favorite movie, or just like top 5, top 10 all-time movies? I want to kind of see that before we get specific. No? Okay.
Well, I think there's a couple of movies that might make my top 10. It depends on the day. You know, that's one of those things that's constantly changing. And certainly there are movies that in here that I feel like are the best of movies from a certain genre. Even if we step outside of sci-fi fantasy, there's some dramas, there's some comedies, there's some other movies that I think are the best of the best, really. And so they're scattered. And also looking over the list, I mean, just like almost everything else in the 80s, one thing that struck me was the variety, the difference of the number of movies. You look at all the movies that are coming out, it's not just, cookie cutter movies that are coming out. There's franchises that are starting, there's some that are continuing, there are some that are ending. And it's a it feels like it's a very, very fertile time for movies.
It was also a year of career defining movies. I think as we're going through this, we're gonna see some movies that's what that actor is still known for, or this is the thing that jump started this particular person's career. I think we're going to see that a couple of times. And also the amount of, Mike mentioned franchises, the amount of franchises that are still going today that were part of this year.
That started in 1984.
Yeah.
So I don't know if 84 is going to have anybody's number 1 or top 2 or 3 movies in it. But like you're saying, Van, even though the highs might not be the highest that you find in the 80s, probably the overall being, in my estimation, is probably higher than any other year, just because there's so many really memorable movies, not just commercial hits, but also genre movies. Like not only, all right, so I found this out, a little bit of trivia about 1984. It was the first year that the domestic box office broke $4 billion in grosses. Ooh. So that's a successful year. It was for the first time in history, 2 movies cleared $100 million in profit. That was Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones. And if you count Beverly Hills Cop's 1985 money with its 84 money, because it came out at the end of the year. Right. If you count that makes 3 movies that cleared $100 million. So a very successful movie that way. In addition, like Mike was saying, there are a lot of sci-fi and fantasy genre films in here that for folks like us, to see this list, to think that it all came out in the same calendar year is pretty amazing. And then you add horror to that, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror from 1984. Oh, yeah. I mean, genre fans should just be thrilled to death with this year.
It's a big cult classic here, definitely.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff, especially here at this convention. There's a lot of stuff here that you see people cosplaying characters from these movies here at DragonCon. And definitely a big year for that.
Yeah, and as you were speaking to your point of how it launched a lot of franchises, I mean, I'll just go ahead and name them. There's 4 that come right to mind.
Right, pause. Hold it. I want to follow up before you go to the list.
Okay.
Because I want you to do that, but I want to say this because you made a very good point there, and I hadn't thought about it. I've been looking at it back, like, well, here's where we are now. Look back at it. In 1984, this was new. Getting this many. I mean, we'd had 2 or 3 big things, maybe. After Empire Strikes Back in '80, I guess you start getting Raiders and Blade Runner and stuff like that. But yeah, coming from the perspective of being in 1984. It was kind of like opening in the tunnel opens out, you know what I mean, into this big world. So I wanted to point that out, that I think that is a very valid point I hadn't considered. Now go ahead.
Well, I think too, it also proves that 82 wasn't a fluke of a year of big movies. 83 had a lot of good movies. 84, we really seemed to be ramping them up, and this was a very, in the 80s too. This was a very prosperous time, I mean, I don't know how to say that well, but it seemed like the studios had more money to throw at things.
Sure, yeah.
It was very
man. Everybody's rolling cash, right? Dynasty and
well, I would say,
but me.
Yeah, well, there's some exceptions, but yeah.
I was 13. I was 13. I wasn't rolling in anything.
Fine straw.
Well, I mean, I haven't thought this through. Maybe I'm wrong here, but it's probably an indication that it was with Star Wars, or particularly Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark, that the geeks started taking over the box office. Mm-hmm. So you start seeing more projects greenlit, more projects in the top 10 for its year for the box office that are going to appeal to folks like us. And it took, CGI and special effects technology for the superheroes to take over. But, if they could have done those back in the 80s, they would have. But
yeah.
But
suddenly the studios are going, oh my goodness, there's money in this,
right?
And they're pouring a lot into it.
So one reason I've enjoyed delving into 80s movies the last few years is it's refreshing to look back at the pre-CGI era. So I would say modern CGI era was ushered in with the 1-2 punch of Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, and so you look at movies before that, and it's just a different realm of filmmaking, and it's, to me, overindulging on MCU and all that kind of stuff, it's nice to be able to look back at more practical effects and practical stunts in particular. But to get back to naming the successful franchises that had their start in 1984, you can say Beverly Hills Cop, Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. Ghostbusters has given birth to a huge fandom. Terminator, and I had one more. Let me look at my list here. Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were other movies that also started in '84 that had multiple sequels, but I wouldn't necessarily brag about them. Like,
no, those are all still going on today.
Yeah,
in some form.
But there's also Mission Impossible, Children of the Corn. They all started in '84 and all had and lived for a while with multiple. And Revenge of the Nerds all had multiple sequels of varying quality.
Yeah.
Barely even touching on any of my favorites either so far. So.
I know. Let me scratch the surface.
The other thing about this year is this is the year of PG-13.
Oh,
yes.
Yes.
This is the year where, the movies are getting a little bit more graphic for PG, and the parents are a little bit of pushback. So I think
Exactly.
Temple of Doom was really the one that was like, no, we want kids to see this, but we also want to let Spielberg be able to like take someone's heart out. So, it was kind of one of those things. Steven really wants this scene, but we really need to sell this to kids. How can we do it? Let's create a new code.
Well, you're exactly right.
Red Dawn, though, right? It was Red Dawn that actually got out first, I believe.
So
I believe you say that PG-13 was on like Red Dawn.
It was so 1984 introduced the problem and the solution, because it was Temple of Doom and Gremlins that gave us the need for the PG-13. They were the two movies that drove that change. They were both 84 movies. And then before the year was over, we had Red Dawn debut the rating, and the second movie was Dreamscape. All 1984.
Oh, that's coming up. That'll be mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Enough of this formality. Let's get on with our favorites. We've each been tasked with the job of naming 5 absolute favorites from 1984 and 5 overlooked gems that maybe are not in your top 5, but you just want to let people know they exist, and it was that year also. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go around this. Let's go counterclockwise, and we're going to start with Bobby. Bobby, what are your 5 favorites for this year?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about several of them. This, Beverly Hills Cop is certainly one of them that I can still go back and watch today. Ghostbusters, of course, is a biggie. I'm also a huge fan of Romancing the Stone, which premiered in this year. And then, of course, going back to, with Indiana Jones and Star Trek returning. Those are probably the ones that I go back and rewatch the most. So those would be my top 5. But there's a lot of good movies. There's a lot of good movies in this year that, do you want to do the Overlook now, or do you want to come back to those?
What do you think? Let's do the 5 favorites, and we'll come back around.
Okay.
Let's do it that way. Mike, what are your 5 favorites and why?
My 5 favorites are, and one of these is one that I didn't see that same year. We'll start with that one, which ends up being This is Spinal Tap. I didn't see that one when it was released in the theater, but I saw that, after on a video once it became a huge thing. And it is today still one of the best faux documentaries that's ever been made. Terminator is also on my list as well. It's you can't overlook that one. Then I'm going to go a little different. 16 Candles is one of my favorite movies. It's probably one that really benefited from the PG-13 thing as well. That's one I can watch over and over again. The Natural gets me every time I watch it. I'm a baseball guy, and it's one of my favorite baseball movies of all time. It's a great movie with Robert Redford. And last but certainly not least on my list is Purple Rain. I'm a huge Prince fan, was before this movie came out, and this movie just exploded. And again, it's another one that benefited. Well, no, this one was R. This one, there's no hiding behind PG-13 on this one.
No. Very good. All right. So with you, David, 5 favorites.
So my 5 favorites would be Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. I don't know if we want to get into explanations of each of these, but I defend that.
Let's for now, and then we'll.
Okay. Well, I have Star Trek 3: Search for Spock. I have Ghostbusters, and I have Red Dawn, and all of those Ghostbusters to a lesser extent, but the other 3 I've kind of have always rewatched. They've always kind of been in my rotation all these years. And then Ghostbusters a step below that. And then there was my 5th one I'll name is one that I didn't watch for 30 something years. And I just watched it again recently last year and was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it, how much I remembered it, and what fond memories it brought back as a 13-year-old Bobby in 1984. And that's actually Karate Kid. I was surprised and heartwarmed by how much I enjoy that movie and recalling everything that went with it in 1984. So I put all 5 of those in my favorite category.
That's all I remember from that movie.
I don't know if Karate Kid was on your franchise list, but that's another one that started then, and it's still still relevant today.
Still
You're
every
right.
day. Yep.
Yeah, they had 3 movies in just the 80s. Yeah.
And then that Cobra Kai series is as hot as anything.
Exactly.
There were 3 movies, then there was a spin-off movie, and then now 3 or 4 seasons of Cobra Kai. So
not to mention all of his appearances in Legion of Superheroes. Oh wait, it's a different anyway, every time I see Legion, I'm like, wait a minute, what is Ralph Macchio doing in here? And then Ralph Macchio might have written it, and then I get really confused. Oh no. Wheels within wheels, man. But anyway, here's my top 5. So let me tell you why you all are wrong. Well, actually, no, some of you had these. I think Mike and I were very close here. I have them in order. Number 1. Well, no, I go backwards. My number 5 is actually a tie because I can't decide between these two. It's Revenge of the Nerds, Beverly Hills Cop. Neither one of them is one of my like absolute favorite movies. But in terms of all the movies that came out in '84, Revenge of the Nerds and Beverly Hills Cop are 2 kind of comedy movies that I did watch a lot back in the 80s. I watched those over and over with my high school friends, and we loved them over and over and over. Just had a great time. That's tied for number 5. Number 4 is the Terminator. I'm not a huge Terminator fan, and I don't love either of the first 2, even though the first 2 are obviously the best. But I think it's important, and I think it's very entertaining, and I think Cameron made it on like a budget of about $12, and it looks like a big budget. It still holds up, so give that. My number 3, this is Spinal Tap. You're exactly right, Mike. It is the greatest fake documentary ever. There have been a lot that have tried, but nobody just. Every moment, every scene, every utterance in that movie has me on the floor. We're in danger of a giant of a Celtic monolith being crushed by dwarfs. You can't beat that. It's so great. Number 2, 2010. Yeah, there it is. I love 2010. I love 2001 in a different way, but I adore 2010 because I'm an answers guy. 2001 asks a bunch of questions. 2010 gives me some answers. Not everybody liked those answers. I don't care. I got answers. Mark Buskett and I did a review of both these movies together. We concluded that I like it because I like to know answers, even if they're stupid answers. And my number 1 movie from 1984 is the one that I can never find in the alphabetical listing because I always look under the B's and it's listed under the A's for the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension.
That's a weird movie.
It's so great. It's everything about it is exactly what I wanted in 1984 when I was 16, and I wanted a cool group of guys running around with a girlfriend, and they're playing in a rock band, and they're fighting aliens, and they're just everything. It's just so good. It's so perfect. It's a perfect movie. So those are my 5. You want to? Do we have any thoughts before we go into our 5 Overlook Gems?
No, I think I think you're.
Nobody's going to say I'm insane or anybody else is crazy for picking a certain thing or how dare you.
You mean on this topic or just in general?
I was going to say, man, everybody loves what they love, right?
You're casting a wide net here, man.
No, I got the eject button here I can push. I do have control of this vehicle.
Man, there's one omission from your top 5 I'm surprised didn't make it, but I don't know if you want me to name it now. We might discuss it later.
I think we probably will. I'm going to do my 5 Overlook Gems in a minute. It might be on there. And then I've actually got a few noteworthy I'm just going to run through if we have time. So something you might too. So let's see what happens. All right. Okay. Let's get into our Overlook Gems. Let's go back the other way. David, 5 Overlook Gems that maybe aren't your 5 favorite, but people need to know it came out this year.
Okay. Well, what I did is it's hard to find stuff that I felt were hidden gems because the stuff that makes 84 good, there's nothing hidden about them. Everybody knows about these awesome movies. So I tried to look at it, scratch the surface and find some that were maybe a little more obscure that kind of got lost in the noise. And I only was able to come up with 4. So in the interest of being quick and succinct here and saving some time, I'll give you 4. So the first one I'll kind of go from bottom to top here. So the first one is a big dumb action movie that kind of sets the template for 80s action movies, big guys and big guns. Missing in Action with Chuck Norris came out in 1984. So here's what's funny. That predates Rambo First Blood Part 2. It predates Commando, all those kind of things. But it's simultaneously a precursor and a ripoff because what the canon there was a treatment for Rambo Part 2 that had been floating around Hollywood since '83, written by James Cameron. And the Canon group got whiff of that, and they rushed out not one, but two missing in action movies to theaters before Rambo Part 2 could get made.
That's Hollywood right there in a nutshell.
So, well, that's Canon Group. It was also, it's a big dumb action movie, but it's one of Chuck Norris's biggest hits, and it kind of does give you the cliche look of an action movie of the '80s. So there's that. If you care about that sort of thing, it's on the bottom of my list. So the next one I have is Razor's Edge, which is Bill Murray's first dramatic role. It's set in World War I. He plays an ambulance driver. It was a passion project for him. He really wanted to get this movie made. Nobody wrote it.
He wrote it, didn't he?
I think he was involved in the writing of it. Oh, I can tell you that. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But no studio wanted to make the deal with him until Dan Aykroyd gave him the idea of negotiating with Columbia and said, "Hey, look, I'll do Ghostbusters for you if you'll let me do Razor's Edge." So that's how they got that deal done. He shot Razor's Edge first and then immediately reported to set for Ghostbusters. But what's kind of cool about Razor's Edge, not only is it his first dramatic role, and we've learned that Bill Murray is awesome at that, but he did write it. There's a speech that his character gives in the movie that Bill Murray wrote it as a farewell speech to John Belushi, who had just recently died. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the next one I have on my list is The Cotton Club, also from 1984. This is Francis Ford Coppola writing and directing. It deals with the mob, but it's in 1930s Harlem in a jazz club where you have black performers with white customers, and the mob is all involved. It's a starring vehicle for Gregory Hines. It actually has his brother in it, playing his brother, Maurice Hines. And so you get the period piece, 1930s. It's got a lot of the same trappings as Harlem Nights that came out a few years later, but this is like the Francis Ford Coppola treatment of that, and it's got everybody from Richard Gere to Fred Gwynn in it. It's pretty cool for what it is. So, and the last one I'm going to mention is Cloak and Dagger. This is the one that what's his name? Henry Thomas from E.T. So what's cool about this movie, first of all, if you're the same age as that actor in 1984, you're eating this movie up. It's like, awesome kids fantasy of getting wrapped up in a real life espionage plot. It's based on a short story that was written like in the 1940s called The Boy Who Cried Murder. And this short story was adapted to film in 1949 in a movie called The Window. And so Tom Holland, okay, not that Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, okay, but the writer and director of the 80s, Tom Holland, adapted The Boy Who Cried Murder, which had already been adapted once into the 1949 movie. He adapted it again to Cloak and Dagger in 1984. And in turn, in doing the script, he was inspired with the idea for Fright Night. So, which is kind of similar, which you have a fan who gets wrapped up in a real life plot. Nobody believes him because he thinks it's just this losing kind of blurring lines with fandom and reality. So this kind of the parallel there with what happens in Cloak and Dagger and in Fright Night, both by Tom Holland. So, don't sleep on that one. Those are my four. So you got Missing in Action, Razor's Edge, Cotton Club, and Cloak and Dagger.
All right. So let's see, Mike, want to give us your hidden gems?
Yes, my hidden gems are as follows. One of them is probably one of my the second funniest movie I found this year, and these are movies that I don't find a lot of people talk enough about. That's the way I determined a hidden gem. It's like, yeah, in the know, some people really know these movies, but I don't really see them getting the Blu-ray restoration treatment, and I think they're really good movies that deserve to be seen. And are kind of forgotten about now. And this one is a comedy. It's Top Secret. The Abrams Zucker. Yes, exactly. The Abrams Zuckers that did Airplane. Those are great. I love those movies a lot. But this one, they're taking a stab at another genre, which is more near and dear to my heart. It's more action. It's more war. They take on war movies, musicals, Elvis movies. Like, it's just like, it's really fun. You've got a great cameo in there from Peter Cushing, as you just referenced, as well as just a lot of other fun moments to it. And I think it still is funny. I watched it not too long ago. On a pendulum, swinging the pendulum the other way. Another hidden gem I find is Blood Simple. This is the first, I think, feature movie by the Coens. And it is, for those people who, like myself, like film noir, it is like the 80s kind of have this sort of revision of the film noir movement, because you have this, and in this year, I think you have Body Double as well, and both of those kind of like, or Body Heat, is that what one of them is?
Body Double.
Okay,
Body
is kind of in this, like, this genre kind of starts back up again here in the 80s, and it really works. It's a very, like, I just watched Blood Simple like a month or so ago, and it still holds up. It's still intriguing, and a lot of people talk about a lot of the other Coen movies, but I don't feel like their first one gets enough attention. The other one is actually getting a lot of attention now because it's available, I think, on Netflix, and that's Streets of Fire. It's a fun flick. And well cast. William Dafoe is amazingly campy in it, and it's got some great music. A very, very awesome soundtrack.
We all hear the song in our head right now.
Exactly. The Dan Hartman song. Yeah, exactly. And it's been on my mind recently because the recent loss of Jim Steinman, who contributed a couple songs to it as well. But in and of itself, I think a lot of people are discovering this on Netflix now, and I see that a lot of people are like, hey, this is really kind of cool. And then two other movies that are not genre movies, but I think that they should get attention just because of the performances in them. Two amazing actors in each one of these movies. And one is The Bounty, which is a remake of, Mutiny on the Bounty, this is like the third or fourth remake that Hollywood's done. But I think it's one of the best. Anthony Hopkins and Mel Gibson are just amazing in it. The rest of the cast is great. It's beautifully shot. I think it's really solid. And then Amadeus, which won all the awards, but yet I still don't hear a lot of people talking about it to this day. And to me, like, it is an epic movie of a really amazing battle between these two musicians. And it's not. It's based a little bit on real life, but just like a lot of the music of the time, it's romanticized. So I like it a lot. So those are ones that I feel like don't get enough attention.
That's good. Yeah. Bobby, if you haven't done.
Yeah, I've got someone that I think they get attention in certain circles, because if you look at the movies of 1984, this was like most of these I saw. These were weekend TNT kind of things growing up for me, because we weren't a big movie theater going family. So most of these I ended up seeing, with cable. So these were very weekend things, and so a lot of these weren't. I don't know if they were huge hits or not. Some were, but it seemed like outside of people like us here at the con that like these sort of things, I don't think they reached as far outside of that, like The Never-Ending Story, which is, for those of us of a certain age, that's probably the first time we bawled crocodile tears watching a sci-fi movie, or at least it probably was for me. So that's a good one. This was also a banner year for the Muppets with Muppets Take Manhattan, which is an absolutely just fantastic movie.
Every time we watch a movie, my wife suggests we could watch a Muppet movie. I'm like,
Can't go all the Muppets.
Yeah, this was also a year too with it was a big year for Tom Hanks before Tom Hanks started doing all these award-winning movies where he does stuff like Splash, which was just a fun, family-friendly movie with Tom and Daryl Hannah as the mermaid,
and finished in the top 10 for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Splash is a big big movie for his career, because I think it's that transitional movie, right?
Yeah.
Where he goes from being comedy to
from just comedy to because there's a.
He had a second movie that year.
It's where the name Madison comes from. There are all kinds of women in the country and the world now named Madison. Before this movie, there were none. It's true.
No.
None. You had
that. Okay. Another one just for the it's a super, great. I don't think it's held up as well. And I know that's actually one of our questions, but we did get Supergirl in this year, which at the time, we were excited to get any superhero movie. We were hoping it would be as good as Superman. It was not, but there was still something cool about the fact that we had another superhero movie, and which at the time was, we're inundated with them today. Back in the 80s, getting a superhero movie was not the norm. So that one, and then the other one I'd like to throw in was a big hit, but I feel should be mentioned. Gremlins.
Oh yeah. For sure. My turn. Let me see. I've got a little list here of noteworthy that we can hit on, and let me actually do this because I can.
It's your show.
It is. I'm gonna do this just very quickly. These are movies that I don't think have been mentioned at all, and they're not my 5 hidden gems, but people need to know they came out this year. You said Splash, done. Johnny Dangerously. Jim an advert. Runaway. Gene Simmons, a villain of sci-fi film with Magnum P.I. Little robots. Got it. Dune. Dune came out this year. It's horrible, but it looks great. Okay, so noteworthy. We talked about Purple Rain. Somebody mentioned Romancing the Stone. 16 Candles. We had a John Hughes movie. Got to mention John Hughes movie. And then you had 2 others: Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, with Highlander playing Tarzan, and Against All Odds, which had the Phil Collins song that became so iconic, right? So, all right, those are all noteworthy. They're not my hidden gems. That's why I blew through them. Here are my 5 overlooked gems. You did actually mention Brian De Palma's Body Double. That movie is completely forgotten today. I must have watched that thing 6 times in the 80s.
You naughty boy.
Oh, man, I would go and rent that VHS. I go down to Movie Gallery or whatever, movie shop in Auburn or Sylacauga, and I would get Body Double. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. It was just action-packed. It's got mystery. It's a little naughty. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very entertaining De Palma movie.
Yes, kids, this was pre-internet. This is how we this is how we got our naughty at the time. Yeah,
this is how we did it. Dreamscape, somebody mentioned that, but that's based on a Roger Zelazny story, but he didn't like the script, so he didn't have his name included on it. It's based, I think, on the Dream Master, He Who Shapes. But that is a really cool one that has just totally been forgotten. Nobody ever mentions it anymore. You said Tom Hanks was in 2 movies, Splash and
Bachelor Party.
Bachelor Party, yeah. He doesn't do movies like that after this. This is where he kind of takes that turn. You don't hear him talking about, I got a 16-year-old Asian girl I have my eye on. No, you don't hear jokes like that out of Tom Hanks anymore after 1984. And then Blame It on Rio, which has a very inappropriate relationship with Michael Caine and some model girl in Rio. That's cute. I watched that a couple of times. And my overlooked hidden gem, Making the Grade. This was Animal House ripoff #1, but I loved it. It was so funny. Making the Grade. It's in that Revenge of the Nerds or Animal House. Wacky antics of the kids on the college campus that are getting away with stuff, and the dean is out to get them and everything. I have a completely different perspective on that today, obviously, but yeah, that's a really good one that I never hear anybody. And it's one of those movies like Buckaroo Banzai that promised a sequel in the credits, and I don't think we ever got it. That way, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to talk about Apex Mountain, and I'm going to forget this. Apex Mountain for different things. 1984 was Apex Mountain for movies promising sequels in the credits and then never getting them.
I can name a second one. Yeah. I can name another one. Yeah.
What is it?
Conan the Destroyer.
Oh yeah, C3.
Yep.
Wow.
They promised us, King Conan. We never got it.
They're still promising us King Conan.
He's still alive. It's just like that movie. Every year, that movie is more of King Conan sitting in a chair telling the story and less of him acting. When I was young, I did this. And then you have Momoa or somebody, Although Momoa's getting too old to play Conan too now. Unbelievable. All right. All right, so let's go up here. Let's get to the categories we've got here, I believe. By the way, I have never seen Footloose, and I have never seen Streets of Fire.
Well,
I have never seen Rowdy, and I have never seen Once Upon a Time in America. That's 4 big movies from this year. I don't know how. I've never seen them.
Footloose is a feel good. Footloose is a feel good.
I didn't like the song. I don't like Kevin Bacon, so there we go. I have 2 very overrated movies. Does anybody want to throw out an overrated? I've got 2 overrated movies from this year. I got to mention, Ghostbusters never worked for me. I didn't like it. I saw it one time in the theater the weekend it came out, and I'm like, nah, it didn't work. And Indiana Jones 2. I just like, didn't care for it. So
yellow card. I have to throw a flag on Temple of Doom. I'll defend that movie.
There you go. All right. I'm sure. I know everybody else likes it. It is considered the redheaded stepchild of the Indiana Jones movies, though.
Sure.
It was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Until Kingdom of Crystal Skulls had Hold My Beer.
Yeah.
Wow.
But also too, just in terms of tone, they tried to go darker, and
they did.
It lost a lot of the fun that certainly the original had.
Yeah, I'll readily admit that it's easily the 3rd best Indiana Jones movie. It doesn't. If you're going to watch one Indiana Jones movie, it's never going to be that one. But the only thing I don't like about it really is Willie Scott character just screams way too much. It just gets a little too shrill and repetitive, and I just wish that would stop. But what I do like about it is from the moment she is taken through the secret compartment in the bedroom wall, all the way to when he climbs up the top of the cliff at the end of the movie and has the stone, that entire breadth right there is all in real time. And so it's action packed and it's in real time. And I love that. I think that is very cool. I don't know if I can name another movie other than the continuous take type movies that can give you that. And the other thing that I think is cool is that at the end of the movie, it totally ties into Gunga Din. So it incorporates that into the Indiana Jones cinematic universe. So I find it cool. So it's enough for me to like the movie more than most people do. But I agree. It's in 3rd place.
Mike, you had something? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just I'm. It's not one of my favorites. So the less said about it, the better. We can move on.
I'll just say this. I respect that they tried to go in a different direction and not do the same thing over again. Because I did think the 3rd one was kind of like Return of the Jedi, going back and trying to recreate the first one again.
Well, no, let me look at it this way. So the MacGuffins of the movies, if you consider them chronologically, because Temple of Doom is a prequel, so that's like a pre-Judeo-Christian pagan type MacGuffin plot, right?
All right.
And then Raiders of the Lost Ark is Old Testament with the Ark of the Covenant. And then Crusade is Christian or New Testament. So there's a progression there with pagan, Old Testament, New Testament.
So all right, I didn't see the 4th one, thank God. Is it Scientology?
It's New Age, it's aliens, it's futuristic, it's post-Christian. Right. It fits the progression.
Scientology, man. So, L. Ron Hubbard shows up and starts showing them with.
I could rant for an hour. What's wrong with the Crystal Skull? But aliens.
Let's move on.
Mike was right. Moving on. All right. What is the single? Now this doesn't say the best. I'm not saying what was the best, but which one of the 1984 movies that we've talked about or not could you just sit down and watch over and over and never get tired of it? Let's start with Mike this time.
As far my favorites, there are. They're all in my favorites. The 3 that I have watched over and over and over again, and I can never get tired of them, are 16 Candles, This Is Spinal Tap, and Purple Rain. Obviously, 16 Candles and This Is Spinal Tap have the comedic advantage, right? There's a joke every 5 minutes, if that. And then Purple Rain is just one big long music video. So there's elements to both of those all those movies that make it so enjoyable to just sit down and watch it whenever. And they just seem to. I never get tired of them.
Yeah, Bobby, your most rewatchable.
The ones that if I ever am flipping through channels and they're on one of the cable channels, and I pass it, I will stop. Certainly, Star Trek 3, Search for Spock.
We haven't really talked about that one. Yeah, that's right.
That one, if I ever run across it, I'll watch it. Ghostbusters, Beverly Hills Cop, and Romancing the Stone. If I run across any of those four, I would probably stop and watch.
We're throwing around monsters of movies. I mean, these are all huge. Let's just remember, these are all from 1 year. So,
and even though Ghostbusters wasn't on my list, it probably would be number like 6 or 7, like in my top 10 or whatever. It makes my top 10, and that one is also something I feel like you can watch it it doesn't get tiresome either.
Yeah. So Ghostbusters is not my favorite, but it would be what I consider the most rewatchable. The ones I've watched the most in reality have been Indiana Jones, Star Trek, and Red Dawn. But as far as like a casual viewing, like, oh, I stumbled across it on TV and I'm going to watch this, I think it needs to be something a little bit lighter in tone, to have that kind of like easy, just whimsical decision to just spur of the moment. Let's watch this. And I think Ghostbusters fits that bill. So I wouldn't call it my favorite of 84, but I would say most rewatchable.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. Well, for me, I think there's two different answers here, because back in the day, the two I rewatched the most were probably Beverly Hills Cop and the Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's what my friends and I would get at the rental store, get it on VHS and watch it. We always had a good time with those. But honestly, the last 10, 20 years, having them on my Plex server, having everything at my fingertips, anytime I want to watch anything, it's right there. It's Buckaroo Banzai in 2010. I mean, those two. I mean, Mira and I have watched Buckaroo Banzai 2 or 3 times together. I've watched 2010 several times in the last couple of years. It's just, I never get tired of either one of those. Spinal Tap would be there, but I watched it again. It's like Beverly Hills Cop. I watched it so many times back then that I haven't been in a hurry to go back and watch it again.
Right.
I haven't watched Beverly Hills Cop in 30 years because I remember the whole movie. I don't, So, because I watched it so many times. That's the danger of rewatching is you burn them into your brain and you can never watch them again because you know it too well.
Well, that's oddly enough, that's how I saw Beverly Hills Cop this year. One of the cable channels ran all 3 of them, and I just happened to be flipping channels right as it started. And the next thing I know, I've watched 2 of them. And then I was like, I'm good. I don't need to see the third one. I'm good.
Quentin Tarantino, I was listening to a podcast yesterday about Quentin Tarantino. He made me go back and rewatch Unstoppable. Just a real quick little story. And the runaway train movie. And I'd forgotten that it was even good. I saw it, 8, 9 years ago. And he said he watched it like 5 times. And then we decided to do the podcast on, he watched it again. He's like, I don't really want to watch this again. I've already watched it like 5 times, but I need to watch it for the podcast. He said, I got 5 minutes into it. And I was just like, it's that good. And that's what we're talking about, rewatchable movies. When you even think you don't want to watch, but when it comes on, you just drop everything. All right, I got to watch this. I got to see this, right? So,
and I think I agree with you too. I would probably add Terminator to that list. I don't know why I keep forgetting it, but Terminator's one too that it just grabs you.
Oh yeah, and over and over and over for sure.
Yeah.
So which 84 movie has aged the best, and which one has aged the worst? Let's just knock these both out here together. Which one of these movies from this year do you look at and go, man, that could have come out last week? It just really holds up. And which one do you go, ooh, that didn't go well? Let's see, Dave.
Me?
I'm sorry, round the other way around. Yeah.
Okay, so I have 3 contenders for what's aged the best. So I think what you have to do for something to age well, it's probably going to be something that does not rely on special effects very much, because that's just going to kind of, deteriorate over time, I guess. But first I'm going up from the bottom, 1984, because the movie 1984, based on George Orwell's book, came out in December, I think. And, there are days where I feel like we're getting closer and closer to Orwell's vision. So it seems like it's aging better as the years go by. But then
but not for the right reasons.
No, I'm not saying that at all. No. So next would be Amadeus, because it's a period piece. And if you're what hurts a lot of these movies for aging well is that they become incidental or accidental time capsules for the 80s. They're just a little too 80s. So if you look at period pieces that were already trying to capture a different era, that's going to hold up a little bit better. So Amadeus, of course, won all the major awards, and it's one of my favorite too. It just doesn't go in there in it's not a genre movie. So, but the one that I will say holds the best, Mike, Spinal Tap. because it has an old look kind of from the beginning, and it captures supposedly, it seems to capture an era of music that's already a part of our past anyway. So to see a documentary that kind of digs into that past, I think it helps it be timeless and evergreen. So I'll put Spinal Tap as having aged the best. And now for aging the worst, I look at special effects. And unfortunately, Arnold comes out the loser for 1984 when it comes to practical effects that don't hold up very well, because the second place finish is going to be Conan the Destroyer. I think everybody will agree that Conan the Barbarian is a better movie, but the reason I like Conan the Destroyer is because it's more of a team movie. It's like a D&D adventure party, and I think Roy Thomas was involved in writing it. Is that right? And Jerry Conway. But the practical creature effects, they don't really hold up very well at all. So but Arnold tops himself because, now don't get mad at me, I love Terminator. I love the first Terminator movie. It's a very smart sci-fi action movie. But let's be real, the effects at the end with the fake face and the head and the cyborg stuff coming out, it's really does not age well. So I'm going to put Terminator as having aged the worst.
In certain ways, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, right, just in terms of those practical effects.
I lost track. Mike, is it your turn now?
I can go. Sure. As far as the movie that's aged the best, David lives up to his names. He's absolutely right. Which is this is Spinal Tap. That's the one that immediately came to mind, and it's because the documentary style is still like one that people can relate to. Even though it's a band, it's a hair metal band, which is not really out there now. But I mean, I think still the dumb musicians and the trappings of rock and roll and all that sort of thing still are applicable, and I think it's still I just find it holds up, I think. Whereas some of the other movies, the ones that don't hold up very well, I think are maybe for, we'll say, problematic reasons, or people just don't understand. I think last year, was on a podcast where we talked about Red Dawn. So I saw it for the first time since I saw it in the theater, and I just think that people today just wouldn't get it. Like it was something that at the time we thought was highly possible, even probable, right? And it would play out something like this, whereas you watch it now and you're like, oh, this is ridiculous. Why did we ever think that this would, I mean, it's a fun movie, don't get me wrong, and it's got a heck of a cast. But as far as being actual something that could happen, it's ridiculous. And
I don't care. When I was 13, I wanted to grab a crossbow and head to the woods.
Absolutely.
Wolverines.
Absolutely. We were all there. We're like, man, we could be invaded. Like, it felt so, and I don't think people today could get that. Like, they just wouldn't get it.
No.
And the other two are two comedies that we know have become problematic. One is 16 Candles, unfortunately, with some of the things that are happening in that movie, and Revenge of the Nerds. There's some moments in there where you're like, you watch it and you're like, oh, that's something that you couldn't do that now.
Yeah, you could do that now. That is right. That is right. Bobby.
Well, oddly enough, I'm going to disagree. I think Terminator holds up very well. I think it, because compared to some of the Terminators that are newer, the effects in the first one look about the same in many respects. So I can't ding them for that. I also think, I mean, in terms of the story and rewatchability, Ghostbusters, I think, holds up well. I mean, yes, obviously they can do some better special effects now, but nothing in there makes me just go, oh, that's crap, and turn it off, So I think those have aged well. As for the ones that have not aged well, as much as I love the search for Spock, there are some shots of the ships and stuff in there that are just, like later movies have really just made the ship scenes and the ship battles, certainly as much as it hurt and emotional as it was to watch the Enterprise blow up. In Star Trek 3, we have since seen them destroy ships in a much grander fashion. So I don't think those have held up quite as well.
But it was emotionally impactful.
Oh yeah,
when it happened.
Yeah,
it hurt. I mean,
that was
it was
a
amazing.
big deal.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I was in the theater and I cried, and I didn't cry when Spock died in Wrath of Khan, but I cried when the Enterprise blew up in Star Trek 3.
Because it was like a home. It was like a second home for us almost.
Yeah,
we had spent so much, even though the movie version and the TV show version are technically two different ships. We had spent a good chunk of our creative and imaginative lives on that ship, and when it was gone, I was boohooing. Right, you know,
where I was working that summer after we saw that movie, a guy I was working with, I said something about the next one, number 4, and he says, "There's not going to be a 4. They blew up the Enterprise. It's over." That's what people thought.
Yeah,
I mean, he was dead serious. You know, I'm like,
now, I may be in the minority, but I much preferred 3 over 4. I never cared for the comedic turn that 4 took, but now 2 is awesome. I'm with everybody on 2. But I was devastated that they killed Spock. So when I'm 13 years old, I found out they're doing a sequel and Spock might be back. I mean, that blew my mind that there would be another movie. You know, so I'm excited. I'm bought in. I'm right there. You know, and I loved part 3, stealing the Enterprise. You know, they're teaming back up and stealing the Enterprise, and then it blows up, and they're fighting to save his kid, and Spock comes back.
I love the camaraderie of those characters too in the third one. That you know, like the little jokes that they were making while they're stealing the Enterprise or things like that. It's the kind of stuff you would have expected those characters to have done in the show. You know, like there's the, you know, why didn't you tell me this is what you're doing? And that's what you get for missing staff meetings. You know? And you know, but it was just so much. There was a lot of fun there. Yeah, 4 it gets a lot more comedic, but I think 4 was a good time for it because 1, 2, and 3 were very, you know, hard, kind of more hard hitting life and death scenarios. So I thought I didn't mind the comedy of the 4th one. I thought it was time for them to take a little break and certainly remind people that Star Trek is not always an end of the earth scenario, because some of the TV series episodes that are the best are hilarious.
That's true. The first 3 movies were for Star Trek fans. The 4th one opened the door to everybody else, and that's why it did better. Wasn't necessarily a better movie. That's why it did better. We got about 8 minutes left.
What?
So I want to get in. Yes, I want to get in at least one more category. All right.
We got to do Apex, right?
Let's do Apex Mountain. So, David, start us out. What was here's the deal. Who or what reached its all-time high point in a movie from 1984? And we already said one, which was sequels promised that we didn't deliver. They didn't deliver on. What else you got?
I've got 4, and I'm not going to share all of them now because I don't want to risk stealing anyone's thunder. But if we have time, I'll circle back to my other 2. Okay, so I'll leave you with 2 right now. I hope I can do my other ones. So first of all, 1984 was the year of the first Police Academy movie. So therefore, it is the apex of Police Academy movies. All right, doesn't get any better after that. It's all straight downhill. But this is a Def Dave answer. The true apex for breakdance movies happened in 1984. So in May, you had Breakin', which actually opened the same day as 16 Candles and beat 16 Candles at the box office that opening weekend. Thank you very much. And then in June, they came out with Beat Street, which to me was the best of the 3 that came out this year. And then in December of the same year, where the first movie came out in May, December gave us Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. So
a title which has led to jokes that happened today.
Absolutely. Not only was it the pinnacle for breakdancing movies, but it's the pinnacle for sequel titles. I mean,
you don't go. So there was Wild Style in 1983, which is good too. None of it beats the best hip hop movie, which was Crush Groove in 1985, but it was not a breakdance movie really. But I will give 1984 2 breakdance movies. All right.
There we go. All right. I didn't do my very quickly. I didn't do my what age the worst, what age the best. I always do. I host and I forget to do it myself. Very quickly, what age the best? You were right. Spinal Tap and Amadeus agreed. What age the worst? Dune, because a bad story. People could overlook it for the effects at the time. Now they both look aged, and it just doesn't hold up at all. Bachelor Party, I'm pretty sure Tom Hanks would like to buy every copy of that and destroy it and pretend it never happened, even though it's a great movie. And 2010 actually has aged the worst, even though I love it, because it's about the Soviet Union and the United States in 2010. That right there by itself did not age very well. All right, let's see. Bobby, Apex Mountain.
No, Mike's turn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, sorry. You could have gone. It's okay. We're all friends here. I think it's the apex because it's sort of the end of the era of the teenage sex comedies.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds, Hard Bodies, Bachelor Party come out here. And it's a transition because 16 Candles takes that and says, you know what, we're going to make this more kid friendly, and we're gonna start doing teenage movies that are funny, but they're not like sex comedies. They're PG. John Hughes starts a whole new genre in and of himself, and he takes over. So the sex comedies are gone after that. But this is the sort of the last gasp, the apex of that era.
It is. That's good. That's good. Who hasn't gone?
Yeah, I have two. Well, I had three. I was going to mention Electric Boogaloo for the pop culture significance. The other two I'll have real quick this was a big year for Eddie Murphy. It was also a very big year because his career really.
This may be Apex Mountain for Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, this was the year.
I don't think so.
I think Eddie Murphy won 1984.
Yeah, even Eddie Murphy has said, I was popular. Then Beverly Hills Cop came out, and I became a movie star.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's even said that was kind of the thing that put him over the top. But I would also say it was a big year, and I'm surprised Mike didn't do this one. This was a big year for mermaids.
This is true.
Splash and...
Well, just Splash kind of kicked off like a mermaid craze. It was around for a while.
Okay. All right. We got mermaids. We got the Little Mermaid.
I'm thinking too much about sex comedies.
No, and actually, Mike, that was where I was going too, because you're right. There were just so many. You named some like Revenge of the Nerds, Blame It on Rio, Making the Grade, Bachelor Party, Body Double to a certain degree had some of that. Against All the Odds was like middle-aged sex, had some of that going in. Romancing the Stone was had some of that going on in it. Purple Rain had a little bit of that going on in it. Splash, little less risque, but kind of the same idea. Footloose, but with preaching. There was just a lot of that kind of stuff going on that year, and I think that's the one I would go with too.
So I have my other two Apex moments.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one is soundtrack-driven movies, and I'm thinking of Footloose and Purple Rain.
Yep.
Both of those were monster albums that held number one on the charts for a long time.
Streets of Fire.
The movie, there's another one. So, but my other thing, and I'm stepping outside of my area of expertise here, but I'm going to venture to say that it was an apex year for horror movies, because not only did you get a Friday the 13th movie, I've got listed here Firestarter, Dreamscape, Chud, Children of the Corn, the first one.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. The very first ever Nightmare on Elm Street.
Wow.
Which, on the very same day that was released, there was another slasher movie that came out also called Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you move the goalpost a little bit, if you decide to include Ghostbusters and Gremlins in there, they're both top 10 finishers for the year, and then it closes the deal. So I don't know if you have a better year for horror in 1984.
Yeah. All right, we got less than 2 minutes to go, but I think we can get this in. I just want to know who won 1984. Give me one name, and you get 30 seconds. Bobby, who won 1984?
Captain Chaos. Cannonball Run 2. Captain Chaos.
Didn't even mention that one. You're right.
I had that. I was saving that one for the recap question we're apparently not going to get to. But,
not going to get to it. Yeah, that's how it goes.
No, I think for an honest answer, I think there were a few people that won. Obviously, we mentioned Eddie Murphy. I think Eddie Murphy had a great year. Bill Murray had a great year. I think you could clearly early, and obviously in Star Trek and Terminator, because they still were on an uphill trajectory.
Okay,
Yeah,
quickly.
Mike.
Who,
Who
Mike?
Prince won 1984. There's just no question. Like all of a sudden, he reaches to the stratosphere. The movie grosses 72 million, only costs like 7.2 million to make. Come on, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Gets an Oscar, gets a Grammy. Come on, the guy like walks out of 1984 a totally like superstar level.
He simultaneously held the #1 movie, the #1 song, and the #1 album all at the same time. Hadn't been done.
How do you not?
The Beatles.
Yeah, how do you not do that?
That's amazing.
So that's a good answer. Eddie Murphy was my other answer, but if I have time, I would to give something different. I'll say that who won 1984 were science fiction and fantasy fans.
Yeah.
So real quick,
won.
so get these in. Some of these we've already named. Some we haven't mentioned yet. Gremlins. This is all 1984. Gremlins, Terminator, Star Trek 3, Firestarter, Dreamscape, Greystoke, Supergirl, Buckaroo Banzai, Repo Man, 2010, Dune, Starman, and The Last Starfighter, and Runaways and Ice Pirates.
Yeah,
And Ice Pirates.
Oh, yeah, Ice Pirates.
Gets it at the buzzer. I agree that Prince certainly did a big. I think it's him and Eddie Murphy, and I do think this is Apex Mountain for Eddie Murphy, just because I don't think he was ever bigger than this again. I think this is when he got to the mountaintop, and he stayed there for a while. But this is when he got there and said, "I am one of the biggest stars." I was on TV late night for a long time. Now here I am, your biggest box office guy. I'll never forget when 48 Hours came out. There was a poll in the paper that said, people that went to see 48 Hours, did you go to see it for like its subject matter or something else, or because of the star Nick Nolte? And I'm like, if I went and saw it, it'd be for Eddie Murphy, and he wasn't even an option. And like 3 years later, he's the biggest star on the planet. That just shows you how quickly. So, all right, gang, we're out of time. That was awesome. You guys did a great job. I appreciate it. And Dragon Con, we will see you guys at the show, hopefully. Adios, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Bye.